On the night of November 30th, 1980, in Atlanta, Georgia. A 38-year-old woman, Faye Dollar, who was a mother of 2 children, had tucked her children into bed and kissed them goodnight. Suddenly, she received a phone call from unidentified person. So shortly after, she wore a red dress with rollers still in her hair, left her house and got in her gold 1972 Monte Carlo car and left the house shortly. Unfortunately, that night, unidentified person hit her at the back of her head with a blunt instrument, killing her in the process. The murderer then completely undressed her and locked her body inside the trunk of her own car. The person then drove the car to Admiral Benbow Inn and abandoned it at the parking lot before fleeing away. Who killed Faye Dollar, a 38-year-old school teacher, and why was she murdered? This is the story of Faye Dollar. Faye Jackson Dollar was born on March 8, 1942, in Madison, Georgia. She was the youngest child in a family of 9 siblings. After completing her high school education, she went to Fort Valley College, which is today known as Valley State University. After graduating with a bachelor's degree, she went to Atlanta University. While at the university, her nephew Milton Jones introduced her to a man known as Donald Dollar. The two became friends, and later on they started dating. Later on, the couple got married. In the year 1972, Faye began her teaching career at Riverwood High School in Fulton County, and life was good for her. Her career was going on well, and her marriage was also good. The couple were blessed with 2 sons who were known as Chad Dollar and Cameron Dollar, and together they were all a happy family. In the year 1975, Faye moved to Atlanta, Georgia with her family, and she was able to continue with her teaching career at Feldwood High School in College Park, Georgia. She taught mathematics as a subject, and today Feldwood High School is known as Benjamin Banneker High School. She was a very hard-working and determined teacher. Therefore, she ended up winning the National Honor Society's Most Spirited Teacher Award in 1979. On the other hand, her husband, Donald, was hired as a basketball coach at another high school known as Frederick Douglass High School, where he coached the Astros, which was the basketball team there. Their marriage life was perfect at the beginning. However, after living together for 13 years, her husband started changing his characters. He became very cruel towards Faye, and from that point going onward, they started engaging in a lot of domestic disputes. The police had been called to their home several times to solve their domestic disputes, but nothing worked. Their family and friends had been also called to their house to settle domestic disputes between them, but they didn't succeed. So the couple ended up having a bitter divorce, which was finalized in September 1980. During the divorce, Faye was granted full custody of their 2 sons. So as the year 1980 came to an end, Faye was adjusting to her new life as a single mother. She lived with her children at 378 King Henry Street Southwest near Cascade Heights, which is now 3778 King Henry Road Southwest in Atlanta. On Saturday, November 30th, 1980, Faye, who was 38 years old, was at home with her 2 sons. That is Cameron, who was 4 years old, and Chad, who was 9 years old at the time. She tucked them into bed that night and kissed them goodnight. At around 9 p.m. that night, Faye received a call from unidentified person, so shortly after, she wore a red dress with rollers still in her hair, left her house, and got in her gold 1972 Monte Carlo to meet the person. That night, unidentified person hit her at the back of her head with a blunt instrument, killing her in the process. The person then completely undressed her, leaving her naked, and then placed her body inside the trunk of her own car, and then drove the car to the parking lot of Admiral Benbow Inn. The killer abandoned the car there and then fled away from the scene. The following morning, when her 2 boys woke up, they didn't find her. When they looked out through the window, they discovered that her car was not there. So immediately, they knew that something was not right. The children called their father and informed him that their mother was missing. When Donald realized that their children were all alone at home and their mother was nowhere to be seen, he contacted Atlanta Police Department and reported his ex-wife, Faye, missing. Soon, the investigators showed up to Faye's home and questioned her 2 boys, who said that their mother placed them at sleep, but when they woke up in the morning, they didn't find her in the house. As the police investigated the house, they found all of her jewelry and jackets present. Nothing seemed to be missing, and so they figured out that maybe Faye had gone out to run an errand and she won't be staying long before she returns. And since she had left her personal belongings in the house, it was very difficult to reach her. On Monday, the police contacted her workplace, and they were informed that Faye had not reported to work, and she didn't even inform anyone that she would not show up for her classes. The school administration added that Faye had never failed to report to work without informing anyone. So when the police heard this, they knew that there was a foul play in her disappearance, so they took the case more seriously. As the investigations continued, Donald gave the police the description of his ex-wife's car and its plate numbers, and the police immediately put out a nationwide bolo, which was beyond the lookout for her. They hoped that she would be spotted somewhere. Unfortunately, Donald had given them the wrong license plate numbers, so police had been out looking for the wrong car the entire time. This made them to lose a lot of time that they needed to locate her. Fortunately, they were able to notice that Donald had given them the wrong license plate numbers, and they were able to rectify the error, and they got the correct license plate numbers. The police were able to place a new bolo. Fortunately, at around 7:30 p.m. on December 4th, 1980, a patrol officer named J.A. Swope was out doing his typical rounds when he spotted the gold Monte Carlo car in the parking lot of the Admiral Benbow Inn, which was located at 1470 Spring Street, northwest Atlanta, Georgia, which was about 15 miles away from Faye's home. So he pulled over and compared the plate numbers and found that the car indeed belonged to Faye. However, there was no sign of Faye inside the vehicle. So he called the forensic team, who arrived at the scene in no time and began processing the car. They dusted the car for fingerprints. After they had collected the fingerprints, they called a tow truck service to scene so that they can access the trunk of the car, which was locked. The tow truck service arrived at the scene and at around 8:15 p.m. that day, and they forced open the trunk of Faye's gold Monte Carlo. Inside the trunk of the car, they found Faye's naked body. She was face down in a fetal position on top of a spare tire that was in the trunk that left marks on her body. Her red dress that she was last seen wearing was nowhere to be found, and neither were any other items of clothing. Her rollers were still in her hair, and she was wearing a gold chain around her neck. The forensic team could clearly see a wound at the back of her head behind her ear, and they concluded that Faye had been murdered. They needed to determine how the victim's car got to the inn, so they interviewed the manager at the inn. The manager said that Faye was not registered at the inn and that the vehicle had been parked there for less than 12 hours. He added that the car wasn't there on Tuesday when the security made the rounds that day. Detectives also spoke to the people who had been staying at the inn, and they said that they had not seen the car in the parking lot at all. Many of them had been driving in and out of the lot that day, but no one recalled ever seeing the Monte Carlo car. Based on the evidence that they had gathered so far, it seemed as if Faye had been killed elsewhere, and then her body was transported to the motel and left in the car. Faye's body was taken for an autopsy, and a medical examiner known as Dr. Robert R. Stivers was able to determine that she had been dead for several days before she was found, and the cause of her death was a blow to the back of the head caused by a blunt force instrument. So they sent the evidence that they had to the crime lab to be tested. Later on, an article about Faye's cause of death appeared in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Then afterwards, cases of missing children being found killed increased daily in Atlanta, Georgia. Those cases shifted the focus of police away from Faye's murder case, and soon there were no more articles about the investigation into her murder, and her case received less attention. A year after Faye's murder, friends and family of the victim began accusing Donald of murdering his ex-wife since she had earlier on reported to them that he was bullying her. However, Donald denied ever bullying or mistreating his ex-wife. Donald was investigated and given a polygraph test, and the police were able to rule him out as a suspect or a person of interest in his ex-wife's death. Donald needed to come clean in Faye's murder, So he spoke to the Atlanta General-Constitution and said that towards the end of their marriage, things between them were not good, and Faye had painted an inaccurate picture of him to her family and friends that he was a bully. After the death of Faye, Donald gained full custody of their children. He faced many challenges as a result of his ex-wife's murder. People harassed him. As if that was not enough, he received threatening phone calls and the police were also questioning him. Later on, the police stopped contacting him, and the threatening calls he always received stopped. It had been 43 years, and the person who killed Faye has never been found, and there is no new information that has been released about her case. There were no information about the results of the fingerprints and other evidences which were collected from the scene. Over the years, the lack of reporting and information from police has caused the information about this case to get lost, and in many instances has caused incorrect information to be attached to Faye's case. Even the Atlanta Police Department itself has inaccurate information attached to Faye's profile on their website. The woman in the photograph that they attached on Faye's profile on their website is not her, and the true identity of the woman in the photo in Faye Dollar's profile is unknown. Faye's profile on the police website also states that she was 22 years old when she was murdered, something which is not true. Faye Dollar was actually 38 years old when she was killed. This age discrepancy only adds to the confusion surrounding the case. It also says that her body was found at the Admiral Benbow Inn, something which is not true. The truth is that the name of the motel was Benbow. The dates provided are also incorrect. It says Faye's body was found on December 4th, 2014. The problem is the information has been incorrect for years, and no one has bothered to correct the picture or the information. The police having incorrect information on their website about this case means that even people who are trying to bring attention to Faye's story don't even have the correct information to go off. Today, her 2 children are all grown-up adults. Chad graduated from Milligan College, where he played basketball, and he did go on to be an assistant coach. Her other son, Cameron, became a championship member of the UCLA Bruin basketball team in the 90s. 43 years after Faye left her home and got murdered, the person who killed her has never been found. May her soul rest in peace, and we hope that she would one day get the justice that she deserves.